Hi, I'm Yasmin Owusu, and this is my producer, Charlie Kesenek.
But I'm your husband, and you're using all my stuff right now. What are you talking about?
So anyway, I've been looking for a one-stop shop podcast for wellness, amateur sociology, psychology, pop culture, and whatever else sparks my interest. So I created one. We are limited to no lanes. We hit the gas and get into it. This is Peaked. Press play. Hi, welcome to Peak Podcast. I'm Yasmin, your host, and we are back in the corner for another chat. I'm recording a little bit ahead of schedule today because something came across my desk that I had to jump on before it got too stale. By the time you get this, it probably will be a little bit over that, news cycle hump, but we're going to get into it anyway. Let's just say it's a bad week, the week that I'm in, which is the past for you, but it's a bad week to be a Black girl with an African last name and a white partner on these TikToks, and I will explain. So I was scrolling my TikTok, which I have to do because it's partially my job. I have a TikTok account for this podcast, and I find a lot of content to talk about. Anyway, I'm trying to justify why I was doom scrolling. So I was doom scrolling, and there was a content creator who I'm not familiar with, but just came into my scrolls, and he said something cryptic along the lines of, I knew something was off when she tucked her braids behind her ears. Now, with the braids and the fact that this was a Black man, I already know I'm in some Black business and I've never minded mine. So I was like, okay, let's figure out what's going on. Let's get in the comments section and find some context. So I go in the comments section, and just from the context of people's responses, I derive that there is a woman who has been detailing her being scammed by some European man. And maybe the commentary is a little bit like she might be a little bit coconut, a little bit whitewashed, and maybe a little bit in the sunken place. But, I don't know all the details. So I find the original content. And it turns out to be this woman. Her name is Onyeka. She's of Nigerian descent. As a Ghanaian, I hope I pronounced that last name right. But anyway, she also had been on the Bachelor series. The Colton season was her season, and also some other reality shows, I guess. One of them involving dating as well. You can guess by the name Colton how that man looked as well. And we can get into how that's pertinent. But anyway, so this 2 million video series. I'm just kidding. There's 20 plus videos, which I could not watch all of. I mean, it was a bit of a slog, I gotta say. I watched a few and I skimmed through some, but I also just watched people's synopses and figured out essentially what the haps was. What the haps was, wow. Anyway, so this woman had gone on a vacation in 2022, I believe, and met a man named Martin Fredsgaard Anderson. We're naming names. And he claimed she met him at a private club in Croatia where she was vacationing. So this is an affluent environment, and they're chatting, they're being flirty. And he mentions during their time knowing each other and getting to know each other that he was a 2-time Olympian, that he comes from Danish aristocracy of some sort, like he's some kind of prince or whatever. Anyway, he's involved with the royal family in Denmark. Interesting. I don't know if Google isn't free on her phone, but it is on mine. It would seem that she didn't utilize it to corroborate any of this, which interesting choice. Anyway, you can see where this is going. They date for 2 months and elope. You see how we're racking up the red flags very quickly as I'm speaking. So basically what transpires is, as you can guess, this guy gets a little bit conny and starts to ask her for money for things kind of all the time. And it's this is happening. And I'm having the worst day ever. It's how he prefaces wanting money all the time. Worst day ever. This happened and I need this amount of money. And he's just borrowing thousands and thousands of dollars from her. She's paying for random things. He manages to solicit money from her family, her friends. At one point, one of her friends loses $300,000 in cryptocurrency to this guy. And, I guess the line is that he has a gambling addiction. She believes that. I don't know that I do. I think that he's just scamming her and taking her money. And maybe once that reveals itself to some extent, he uses the gambling addiction as an excuse. Like, I don't know if I believe it's gambling. I think he's just spending her money. And when that runs dry, he was intending to like hop onto some other, sucker. Anyway, they do end up getting divorced in 2025. And now she's kind of in the process of, while she put out this series, and she's trying to maybe connect with other people he scammed. And she says that she has gotten in contact with people that were dating him at the same time as her, that maybe also lost some money, blah, blah, blah. Right. And, I have a lot of the same feelings that many people on the internet do about this sounding like you're just blowing through mad red flags. And I think like a lot of Black people online, it maybe does feel like this woman felt some desperation to keep this guy or to like have him be interested in her. Like she was like, it was kind of a pick me situation. She was like, pick me. Like, I'm a suburban sounding Black, right? And I also, my partner is a white person as well. So like, I'm not judging any of that. But I do think that her behavior feels very consistent with maybe some people I've come across who they're how do I put this? Their commitment to white acceptance and white adjacency really puts them in this position where they're almost like pay to play. There's no like better way to like put it than that. I think maybe a take that I have that I don't know that I've seen so explicitly, like voiced online, is that I'm not sure that she was not aware that this guy was kind of just spending her money, ripping her off on some level. I think there was probably a point, in my opinion, where she was not believing his stories for why he was asking for money. He was not believing that she was going to get her money back, but she thought there was just a ceiling on how much he would ask for, and then it would satisfy him, and then he would just be her boyfriend. I think she was so desperate to stay in this relationship. The way she describes this guy too, like she said a phrase that doesn't even make sense. She was like, he had chiseled skin. What is chiseled skin? That's like not a thing. I think she meant he was chiseled and had chiseled features or whatever, but she was like basically described him as like a Greek god, and he's just gorgeous. And like, I saw pictures of this guy. Definitely look him up. To me, he looks like a less rugged Gordon Ramsay or something. He's got a little bit of that Sharpay kind of squished face thing. I don't know. Anyway, not my idea of like the say all end all of like Nordic gods, but it was hers, I guess. But I think that for whatever reason and whatever goes on in this woman's head, she was just so excited to get this man's approval, attention, and to be seen with this person. And I think the Europeanness, the whiteness had something to do with it. And I hate to say that again, as a person in an interracial relationship, it just did feel like I would see these like little videos of her and like photos, and she'd just be sitting next to him in the car that she's paying for, that he's driving. And she just has this like way of just sitting there looking like so content with her chin just jutting out, just bobbing her head around, like, looking like a Pac-Man. And I saw that expression. I think a lot of people said in the comments of like those kinds of photos that she looked really smug. I think that's the look of a woman trying to exude contentment and feeling comfortable and loved up when she fully knows that like it's sketchy and does not feel it that way. And I think that's why it looks so artificial and so forced. And that's why she looks so tense, even though she's trying to look like just a blissful couple. It's like they have awkward body language, and necessarily so, because like this dude obviously is just there to scam her and rip her off. And that's essentially what happened. And yeah, it gave us as Black people, but also like, as us people who sometimes have been in like predominantly white spaces, a whole lot to unpack. I think I've gotten lucky in this regard to some extent. Like I am like biracial, I don't know how much that presents in the US, but I grew up largely in East Africa. My parents were posted there. And so like I lived in countries that were, I was not a minority in those countries growing up. Until I was 18, I was, mostly living in East Africa. I did have some, predominantly white space moments. When I lived in Italy, I think my school there was, there were different cultures, but I wouldn't say there were a lot of Black students for quite a while there until we started getting um, some base kids, like kids who were like from the military bases. They were boarding in Rome by our schools because their bases were in places like close to Rome, but not Rome. So like Vicenza and like areas like that. And their parents would just be on the base and they'd send their kids to our school and they'd stay in kind of like a boarding house thing. And then we had more Black kids at that point. But for the first year and a half that I was in that school in Italy, it was pretty white. And I definitely experienced some of that otherness there. But because I had such a foundation, at that point, I'm already 12 years old, right? So I had such a foundation of like being around either just an international crowd, which is like all colors and all cultures, or I'm in a predominantly Black country. And also, my mom is Armenian, but I was raised by my dad, who is Ghanaian, and my stepmother, who is Tanzanian. So I was raised in both my parental figures that I was raised in the home with were African Black people, right? So I don't have a lot of that caught between two worlds, like biracial, like beat poetry stuff. That's not my vibe necessarily. Like I don't have that, don't know where to belong thing. Even though being third culture, you don't have this like really defined home country. You don't have this really defined, hometown. I was very much steeped in my dad's like Ghanaian culture and also just being an international kid was some kind of culture for me, I guess. And it didn't involve my race necessarily, right? So it was very easy to just like settle in and feel pretty comfortable with like Blackness and understand that how you're perceived is essentially how you live, right? I'm saying all this knowing not enough about this woman to make any of these estimations, but I think a lot of us did. She feels like the girl who, was in Ohio and everybody was white and, she's frying her hair and tucking, tucking her braids behind her ears and hoping for the best and, just trying to fit in. Right. And I think that can cause this like just overly desperate to get the affirmation of what she considers to be kind of the beauty standard in our country man, right? And I keep saying what she considers because I think even people who have been attracted to or are white people would maybe not consider this guy to be quite as attractive as she does. Anyway, so Miss Onyeka, what? It did also remind me of something that I heard as our problematic queen, Azalea Banks. And you can take a lot away from her. Some of those things should probably be her phone, her, access to the internet and Twitter and maybe even her freedom. But what you can't take away from her is she is an astute observer and a cultural critic. And I did see that there had been some discussion of Tyler, the Creator, and how he has been derogatory towards Black women in the past, like through tweets and just through things like basically his internet footprint has been a little iffy towards Black women. And he's kind of sort of trying to rebrand himself and be very like, I'm down with Kendrick Lamar, whatever the hell he is now. And I think a lot of people are like, we remember. And Azalea Banks's response to that was, what do you expect? This guy is like, he's a Nigerian, right? And like, we all know they're like, she used a more offensive word for like kind of an Uncle Tom type. And then she also called him a really derogatory word for homosexual. So she essentially said he's a homosexual Uncle Tom, but in more colorful Azalea Banks like terms. And while I do not agree with her wording, I can, as an African living in the United States, kind of understand to some level how that is a thing. I didn't grow up here as an African just living in America. I grew up there and came here for college, and that was much later. And I definitely experienced the all white space thing when I went to college in Seattle as well. But by then, again, you have your identity really solidified. And even if it's not great to like not get attention, it's not great to be treated maybe as in the attractive level you feel like you belong in because you're not the beauty standard where you are, right? that does suck. And I could kind of commiserate with the Asian people that were living there and, whoever else I could come across with. But I wouldn't say that I internalized it to the point that people can if that starts at a really young age. Because I had a sense of where I kind of sat in in the attractiveness and in the world before that. I mean, you get to 18 and, you have a lot of your brain kind of formed by then. But I can understand they are two different cultures. African American culture and African culture are two different things. And I know that Onyeka's parents are pretty traditional Nigerian people. She talked about that a little bit. And I mean, while African American culture, by the way, is not a monolith, so I don't want to act like everyone acts the same when they're a Black American. That's not true either. But I think a lot of Caribbean people and African people can understand and would corroborate that we do have a different way of being and seeming. And, we're not going to have the same cultural references. We didn't watch the same TV. We, don't have the same accents. We don't eat the same foods. And, in my case, you have this way of speaking, right? I have a no region accent. And that's not just like a black white thing. That's also like, what even is this accent? It's an anywhere USA thing. And I think a lot of us who are African who went to schools that were English speaking end up with this because you just learn it from your teachers, you learn it from random other kids. And so it's just cobbled. It doesn't actually have a grounding in a real region. So all of those things can kind of make you feel a little bit separated from the people who you look like once you get to this country. And it can also give you that edit of being like, you don't want to be Black because your way of presenting Black is not the overarching way that people stereotype Black people to be in this country. And also, that's not fair to other African Americans because a lot of them don't have exactly the same way of expressing their Blackness, right? So yeah, I can understand what she's getting at with that. And then, there are also just people who are not proud of their heritage and are teased for being like, a lot of Africans can be, darker, like, just myriad things, myriad reasons to feel othered, even in your own racial community because you're of a different culture, right? And I think it can factor. I've seen a lot of women behaving, I wouldn't say as unhingedly as this Onyeka character, but I watch some Bravo nonsense. I like my smooth brain shows on Bravo, and I watch, for example, Summer House, it's a show about a bunch of like young, attractive people who like get a summer house in the Hamptons, which is like it's an affluent area. But people who aren't super moneyed get share houses there just to go and party for the summer, and they split it a lot of ways and it doesn't really cost that much money. So it's not like prohibitively expensive if you're just like a young person. So it's a show, it's like a real world with that. So it's like guys, girls all in this house and they're like partying in the Hamptons together and some of them hook up. And, there weren't a whole lot of Black cast members on this show, but there were a few. There was a girl named Maya and, there's the main one who's been on for the longest, I would say, is a girl named Shera, who is absolutely stunning. I mean, a 10 out of 10. But in this world, in this context where she's just with white guys and white women, she's constantly being treated like she's like a 4 and she's just like should just be happy to be there. It's insane. Please look this girl up if you're not aware of who she is. She looks like a model. She has been a model. She's also like a registered nurse. She's smart. She's funny. All this stuff. But she keeps basically chasing around, this dude West at one. I mean, there's several dudes that she made a complete fool of herself on this show that she let make a fool of her on this show. And, I don't know if that would be her proclivity if she had other choices. And she's in the Hamptons and there's who there is there. And it's all just kind of like these white guys. And I would hope maybe she's from Atlanta. Maybe this is not her reality in Atlanta or in New York where she now lives. But in the Hamptons, it just really did seem like white was right. And whoever this was, she was just going to like, give it her all and let them just absolutely disregard and just like treat her like she's like, some like little 4 walking around. And I mean, I'm talking about a dude who looks like a pork rind named West, who was treating her like she was absolutely just desperate for the wonder that was him. And, we see this on Love Island too. We see this on The Bachelor all the time. Maybe Onyeka was on The Bachelor for a season. And, the guy that she was vying for his attention ended up being homosexual. So there's that too. Anyway, lots to unpack there. And it definitely was not my favorite moment for the perception of girls who sound and look and have names like me in the United States. But here we are. And I wish her well with all of that. And I hope that she can find the self-acceptance and self-esteem to not blow through such glaring red flags because, some European man is showing her attention. And that's what I think went down. That's my opinion. And I know that many people have different ones. But you know what they say about opinions. Anyway, let's move on. And I do want to talk a little bit about Zoran Mamdani had a meeting with Donald Trump. And, I saw my little clips of it on you name it, Reels, TikTok, like wherever I get my news. And there was a lot of discussion around how, Trump has been very critical of Zoran overall. He was saying that he was going to try to find some way to arrest him or whatever, just stop him from doing what he wanted to do. If you're not familiar, Zoran Mamdani is now the mayor of New York City. But during his campaign, Trump was very anti and was like, we can't have that guy in there. Like, was very against him, was like, he's a socialist and blah, blah. Like, you can name other derogatory things he said about him. But after this meeting, it seemed very simpatico between these two. Trump was like veritably kicking his legs and like giggling flirtatiously at this man. And a lot of people were surprised by this turnaround. It was like to a point where at one point, a reporter asks, Zoran, do you still think that Trump is a fascist? You've described him as like being kind of a fascist and a despot. And he starts to say, well, I've talked a lot about, and then Trump is like, it's okay. You can call me a fascist. Like, it's easier for you. And it's not like, he didn't even say it rudely. It was like good naturedly. It's like, you don't need to like, we're good, baby. I know, I know how you feel about me now. It was just wild. Watching the turnaround, but at the same time, and this, I guess, is more what I want to get into. I think the surprise at how quickly Trump flips his opinions and his talking points on things and people and anything, not so surprising to me. And I think it would not be so surprising to a lot of people who have had a lot of dealings with cluster B personalities. And again, I say it almost every podcast because I'm such a, armchair a psychiatrist. Obviously, I cannot tell you, what Trump, if any personality disorders he may have. But, I'm going to say to me, he seems very similar to a lot of malignant narcissists that I've observed. So anyone who's had a lot of dealings with like malignant narcissists, some borderline personality disorder people, some people with bipolar disorder, well, less that, narcissistic personality disorder, it's pretty common to have a really volatile sense of self and other people. These people externalize everything. Let's just say everything. So they externalize what makes them successful. So they're always thinking about how something is perceived. They're almost always outside of themselves, looking at themselves, right? Like, people talk about how much it's bad. Like, you can kind of be a mirror to them, and that can be really a contentious relationship because they really do see themselves in terms of how other people see them. They don't have a very developed inner world that is just created by them, right? So Trump, his whole life, if we're allowing, just for allegedly conversation's sake, if we're allowing that he may be a malignant narcissist, he spent much of his life just trying to figure out what would make him project being really successful, being really like someone to admire, like, all the grandiosity, all that, right? It's all coming from how he thinks other people would react to him. And then he's also watching other people and seeing, do other people look at that person and think that they project success? And that's how they kind of metabolize everything. So the thing with that is it can change on a dime because it doesn't have any grounding in sense of self, in reflection, right? So it really just changes based on what they see in people's micro expressions, how they see people treating somebody in one moment. And it doesn't have enough context. It doesn't have enough, again, it doesn't have enough grounding in anything. And I found that, like, I grew up with someone in my household, and I won't say who, but anyway, someone very close in my very small family that I lived with day to day, who, I don't know the diagnosis there either, but I think we're in a cluster B situation. And it was very similar. One day, this person could perceive you as their bestie and just funny and innocuous and like completely harmless. And another day or another second, they could think that you're like out to get them and that they're paranoid about you. And I mean, even when you're like a 10-year-old, they're like, this person is out to get me. And I think a common mistake that people can make with people like that too is, so they are easy to manipulate. And I think this is what you're seeing with Trump is he's easy to manipulate. And Zohran Mamdani was able to flatter him in a way or just project not being there to be contentious in a way that really put him at ease and made him feel comfortable, confident, and respected. And you know that he doesn't respect him, and you know that he doesn't think that he's like he doesn't I guess he's not impressed by Trump, and we all know this, right? But he managed to make Trump feel like he was because these personalities are easily manipulated. Here's the issue. If you're thinking about trying to manipulate a narcissist or, a lot of cluster B personalities, the problem is so can everyone else, and very quickly. And I think a lot of people who are trying to have transactional relationships with these people, they're like, oh, I can just get in their ear and completely change their mind. It's great. I can end up being written into their will. Like a gold digger loves a narcissist, right? Because they just can get right in there and mess with their brain and turn them against other people. They can probably steal them from their wife, whatever. The problem is, so can everyone else. That is a problem with people that have unstable senses of self and unstable senses of what they are in the world, is everyone can steer them in a different direction. So as quickly as you spun their head around, the next person can too. As quickly as they dumped someone to be with you, they can dump you to be with the next person. And without a thought, it can happen like that. So while it's easy to manipulate them, it's not easy to hold pattern because everyone can do it and it's not a special skill. And that does kind of tie into another theme that I've been seeing, and, mostly just in culture. I mean, with people that like I was working in restaurants until really recently, and I work with a lot of younger people. And then, obviously I'm on my TikTok nonsense and watching my shows, whatever. And so you do see a lot of just how certain themes are just being metabolized by young people. And one that I'm noticing a lot is a real normalization. And I'm going to preface this by saying this isn't necessarily negative. It's something I'm observing, and I think maybe people need to unpack a little bit more. There is a very relaxed acceptance of kind of sex work, transactional themes between men and women. This is a difficult thing to like put into like very succinct words. There are a lot of creators, like I think a lot of you are going to be familiar with Shera Seven. People call her Sprinkle Sprinkle Lady. Her content is very, use men, like don't ever let a man feel comfortable. Like he should just be paying for you. It's like, what should I do for men? Nothing. That kind of thing, right? And her philosophy is very much that you're there to be taken care of and men are there to provide. And no, you don't show them vulnerability. No, you only keep them on their toes, and anything they want comes at a price, right? And we can all say that that's fine. That's if they're two consenting adults that they want to have that kind of transactional relationship, great, And there are many, I think, people, not just creators, who are starting to sound and operate that way. And I guess I feel myself wanting to make sure that people who are consuming that content and listening to these creators or listening to these people, and they're not all like like I feel like Julia Fox has had a very similar way of speaking about relationships and men and how she approaches them in the past. I mean, she's in her celibate era now, but when she wasn't, it was very much that. And she has actually done legitimate sex work. And again, I don't have judgments about doing sex work. Great, whatever works as long as it's all consenting and you're a full grown adult and whoever you're interacting with is as well. But it's one option. And I'm not so sure that everyone who's consuming this content understands that the sprinkle lady, that a lot of these people just being like, get the bag, this is very transactional sex work language. And I know a lot of the rebuttals of that are going to be, I guess things like, well, everybody gives it up for free, then, why not get something out of it? But well, not all relationships actually do feel that transactional. And I think there are a lot of people operating out of trauma and lack of and mistrust of people, very, very broken trust and an inability to be vulnerable. And what is safe for them and what works for them is making sure that they are in control of why they're there and what they get, and don't really grant a lot of like vulnerability and don't leave a lot of room to be hurt, right? And if that's you and that's your safest way to interact with a romantic partner or whoever, great. If that's not you, think about what you're consuming. Sex work isn't for everybody. And again, that's not a judgmental statement. I just don't know that everyone who is just like kikiing with this understands you may not have the gut for it if you haven't been brought to the point where that is at the core. It's a traumatized response, in my opinion. It's a response of someone who like cannot trust and so only can have something very cut and dry, like almost an agreement, right? That's not the relationship I have, and I don't feel taken advantage of, and I don't believe my partner does either. And that's also a great option. And I don't necessarily want it to just be conflated with this is how respect works in a relationship. No, respect doesn't have to be a transactional thing. It's built on trust. It's built on mutual respect and trust for each other that is cultivated. And if you really are unable to receive or give trust, this might be the way that you operate in relationships, and that's fine. But just make sure that's you and don't, be on your SW baddie life and not have the steely guts for it. Like if you look into Miss Shera's eyes, you know that woman has the cojones and the guts for it. We don't all. I know I don't. It's not for the weak, for what I can see. That's just kind of something that I've observed, and I would love to hear other people's perspectives on that. And if that's anything that's I don't even want to say concerned me. It's newer, and I'm just kind of like, I wonder what the implications are of impressionable people normalizing that to a degree where they don't really understand that it's two options. It's not, this is the way that women are respected in relationships. Anyway, I'm going to leave it on that. And if you haven't had your Thanksgiving already, which I think by the time I release this, you will have, hope you had a good one. And, I'm thankful that I'm not Onyeka. Anyway, with that, see you later.